Detroit's roster is quietly taking shape, and if you really look closely at what's happening behind the scenes, there's a very clear message being sent by this front office. Nothing is guaranteed anymore, not even for players who felt comfortable just a few months ago. As the 90-man roster continues to fill out and the undrafted free agents are about to be officially added, the Lions are entering a phase where competition is no longer just a talking point, it's becoming the identity of this team heading into 2026. Brad Holmes made that crystal clear right after the draft, emphasizing that while the team already has a strong core, the real objective now is to push that core even further. And the way you do that is by making sure every single spot on the depth chart feels pressure. That's exactly what's happening here. There's a sense that players won't just be competing against opponents this season, they'll be battling each other every single day once training camp begins. And even before that, these spring practices are going to matter more than usual because they're the first opportunity for guys to start separating themselves. Let's start with the quarterback room because even though it looks stable on the surface, there are subtle changes that matter. Jared Goff is coming off an elite season statistically, finishing near the top of the league in passing yards, touchdowns, and efficiency. He led one of the best offenses in football and earned another Pro Bowl selection, so there's no question about who the starter is. But here's where it gets interesting. He's now adjusting to a new offensive coordinator in Drew Petzing. That alone introduces a level of uncertainty, especially when you combine it with changes on the offensive line, including a new presence at center. Timing, chemistry, communication, all of that becomes critical during this offseason period. Behind him, Teddy Bridgewater brings experience and stability, exactly what you want in a veteran backup. But there's already an open door for competition here too. The team could still bring in a young quarterback to challenge for that third spot or even push Bridgewater in camp. That's the theme across the board. No room is completely safe. At running back, the shift is much more visible. Jahmyr Gibbs is now undeniably the centerpiece of this backfield. After a huge 2025 season where he produced both on the ground and through the air, the offense is clearly being shaped with him in mind. But the big change is the arrival of Isaiah Pacheco, who steps in after David Montgomery was traded. That move alone tells you the Lions wanted a different dynamic behind Gibbs. Pacheco brings a physical edge, but he's not walking into a guaranteed workload. Sione Vaki is a name you need to watch closely here. The coaching staff has shown real excitement about his development, especially considering he's still relatively new to the position. If he stays healthy, there's a real possibility he starts taking snaps away and turning this into a legitimate rotation battle. Then you look at the wide receiver group, and while the top three seem locked in, the real drama is happening behind them. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams headline a unit that already has proven production and explosiveness, and Isaac Tisla is coming off a strong rookie year with 6 touchdowns. But once you get past those names, it becomes a wide open fight. Greg Dortch might have a slight edge because of his familiarity with the offensive system and his value on special teams, but nothing is guaranteed. Tom Kennedy has built a reputation for sticking around when people count him out, and then you have a group of younger players like Kendrick Law, Dominic Lovett, Jackson Meeks, and Malik Cunningham, all fighting for what might be just 1 or 2 roster spots. That's where special teams and consistency in camp are going to decide careers. At tight end, there's a mix of confidence and concern. Sam Laporta is expected to return from back surgery and be fully ready for camp, which is huge for this offense. When healthy, he's a major weapon, but the fact that he missed the final stretch of last season is something to monitor. Behind him, Brock Wright and Tyler Conklin provide reliable veteran depth, and Conklin's past production suggests he could play a bigger role than some expect. What makes this group even more intriguing is the contract situation. None of these players are signed beyond this season. That adds another layer of urgency and competition, especially with the front office already expressing interest in locking Laporta up long term. And then we get to the offensive line, where some of the most important battles are about to unfold. At center, Cade Mays comes in as a strong, experienced option who has proven he can handle the role without allowing much pressure. But he's not alone. Juice Scruggs adds versatility and experience, and Seth McLaughlin, despite coming off an injury, was highly regarded entering the draft. draft. If he's healthy, he could absolutely push for a role. This is not a settled position. At guard, Tate Ratledge looks like a long-term answer on the right side after an impressive rookie season. His ability to protect the quarterback stands out, especially his consistency late in the year. On the left side, Christian Mahogany showed flashes but needs to prove he can be consistent week after week. And with Ben Bartch and Miles Frazier in the mix, both bringing experience and versatility, there's real pressure here. Frazier in particular feels like a wild card who could shake things up if he stays healthy. Finally, at tackle, one of the biggest potential changes is looming. With new additions like Blake Miller and Larry Borom, the expectation is that Penei Sewell could shift to left tackle. That move alone would reshape the entire line, but it also creates a direct competition on the right side between Miller's upside and Borom's experience. And don't overlook Giovanni Manu, who is entering a critical year where potential needs to turn into production. There's opportunity here, but also pressure. When you step back and look at all of this, it becomes clear that this roster isn't just being built for talent, it's being built for internal competition at every level. The Lions aren't just trying to be good, they're trying to create an environment where players are constantly being pushed, where nothing is handed out, and where the best version of each player is the one that shows up on Sundays. So the question now becomes, with competition increasing across almost every position on offense, which of these battles do you think will have the biggest impact on the Lions' success in 2026? And when you carry that question forward, the answer starts to reveal just how interconnected all of these position battles really are, because none of them exist in isolation. What happens at center affects Jared Goff. What happens at running back affects how defenses line up against the passing game. What happens at wide receiver depth could completely change how this offense functions in critical moments. This is not just about filling out a roster, this is about shaping the identity of the entire unit. Take the offensive line as the foundation of everything. If Cade Mays truly locks down that center position and delivers the same level of pass protection he showed previously, that immediately stabilizes the interior. But if there's any inconsistency, suddenly you're looking at a rotation or even a late camp decision that could delay chemistry. And that matters even more because Goff is adjusting to Drew Petzing's system. A quarterback learning new timing concepts and protections cannot afford instability in front of him. So this competition at center isn't just about who wins the job. It's about whether the offense starts fast or spends the early part of the season figuring itself out. Now layer in the guard situation. Tate Ratledge looks like a piece you can rely on, especially with how he finished last season, but the left guard spot is far from settled. If Christian Mahogany takes that next step and becomes consistent, this line suddenly looks balanced and dependable. But if he struggles, players like Ben Bartch or Miles Frazier could step in, and that kind of mid-level shuffle can ripple across the entire line. Continuity is everything up front, and right now, continuity is being challenged by design. And then there's the tackle situation, which might end up being the most impactful decision of all. Moving Penei Sewell to left tackle feels logical given the additions on the right side, but it's still a major shift. You're asking an elite player to adjust, while at the same time, trusting that either Blake Miller or Larry Borom can hold down the opposite side against top-tier pass rushers. That's not a small gamble. If it works, the Lions could have one of the most complete offensive lines in football. If it doesn't, it could expose weaknesses that weren't there before. Now shift your focus to the skill positions, because this is where things get even more unpredictable. Jahmyr Gibbs is clearly the focal point, but how much help he gets and from whom is still undecided. If Isaiah Pacheco establishes himself early as a reliable complement, this becomes a balanced backfield that can wear defenses down. But if Sione Vaki emerges and starts taking meaningful reps, you're suddenly looking at a much more dynamic and unpredictable rotation. That kind of internal competition could actually redefine how this offense attacks defenses week to week. At wide receiver, the top of the depth chart gives you confidence, but it's the back end that could quietly swing games. Injuries happen, rotations matter, and having the right fourth and fifth options can be the difference in close matchups. If Greg Dortch leverages his familiarity with the system and special teams value, he could carve out a consistent role. But if one of the younger players like Jackson Meeks or Dominic Lovett flashes during camp, the coaching staff might prioritize upside over experience. These are the types of decisions that don't always make headlines but end up shaping the season. And don't overlook the tight end situation, because Sam Laporta's return from injury is one of the most important variables on this entire offense. If he comes back at full strength and looks like himself, he adds a layer to this system that very few teams can replicate. But if there's any limitation, even early in the season, players like Tyler Conklin and Brock Wright will need to step up in a bigger way than expected. And with all of them essentially playing for future contracts, the motivation level in that room is going to be extremely high. What stands out the most in all of this is how intentional it feels. This isn't a roster with accidental competition, it's a roster designed to create it. Brad Holmes and the coaching staff are clearly betting on the idea that pressure brings out performance. They're creating scenarios where players have to earn everything, not just once, but continuously. And that kind of environment can elevate a team, but it can also create tough decisions when talented players inevitably get pushed out. Because that's the reality here. Not everyone is going to make it. Some familiar names will lose roles, some young players will rise faster than expected, and some battles will come down to the smallest details. A special teams play, a missed assignment, a single standout performance in camp. That's how thin the margins are becoming on this roster. So as this offseason continues and we get closer to training camp, every rep, every practice, every opportunity is going to matter more than usual. The Lions aren't just preparing for a season, they're building a competitive ecosystem where only the most consistent and impactful players will survive. Now I want to hear from you, because this is where the conversation really matters. Which player or position battle are you watching the closest? And who do you think is at the biggest risk of losing their spot as this competition heats up? And that's exactly where things start to turn from projection into reality. Because once training camp opens, all the speculation disappears, and it becomes about performance under pressure. Every storyline we've talked about, every potential battle, every what-if scenario, it all gets answered on the field. And the truth is, this is the kind of roster where surprises are not just possible, they're expected. Think about how quickly momentum can shift in a competitive environment like this. A player who starts camp buried on the depth chart can climb in a matter of weeks with the right consistency and impact, especially in a system that's clearly rewarding performance over reputation. At the same time, established names who don't adapt quickly enough, whether it's to the new offensive scheme or the increased level of competition, can find themselves losing ground faster than anyone anticipated. For Jared Goff, this might quietly be one of the most important off seasons of his time in Detroit, not because his job is in danger, but because the structure around him is evolving. A new offensive coordinator means new rhythms, new reads, and potentially a different identity for the offense as a whole. If he and Drew Petzing click early, this offense could take another step forward and become even more difficult to defend. But if that adjustment period lingers into the regular season, it could slow down a unit that has the potential to be explosive right out of the gate. And everything ties back to execution. The offensive line has to come together quickly. The running back rotation has to find its balance. The wide receiver depth has to sort itself out in a way that gives this offense reliability beyond the top names. The tight end group has to prove it can stay healthy and productive. There are a lot of moving pieces here, and the difference between a good offense and a great one is how quickly those pieces lock into place. What makes this situation even more fascinating is how it reflects the mindset of the organization. This isn't a team that's standing still or relying on what worked last year. Even after a strong season, they've introduced change, they've added competition, and they've created internal pressure across the board. That's not always comfortable, but it's often what separates teams that stay competitive from those that take the next step. And let's be real for a second, this approach is going to lead to some tough calls. There will be players who fans have grown attached to who might not make the final roster. There will be debates about whether the team made the right decision at certain positions. And there will be moments during camp where one performance completely changes the narrative around a player. That's part of what makes this period so important and so unpredictable. By the time the regular season arrives, this roster is going to look different than it does right now. Not drastically at the top, but in those key depth areas that often decide close games. And if the Lions get these decisions right, if